Hello, everyone. This is Trey Dean with Pinnacle Safety Solutions, and today we are going to talk about heat illness. Specifically, we're going to go over what some of the risk factors are for heat illness, what the signs and symptoms are, how to prevent it, and some best practices. So, speaking of prevention, really, as with anything, when we're talking about staying safe and healthy at work, prevention is key. What's that old saying? Uh, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. That certainly applies with heat illness. We want to pay attention to ourselves and our coworkers as we are working. So, what are some of the risk factors at work when we're talking about heat illness? I suppose this applies at home as well, but primarily is 90 degrees Fahrenheit or above. So, we'll take a look at a heat index chart in just a few minutes. But whenever the temperature gets above 90 degrees, and then you combine that with 40% or more humidity, you are going to get a heat index or a real feel temperature that is uncomfortable and can lead to feeling quite a bit hotter than it actually is and can cause you some problems. If we are working in a place where we've got a lot of radiant heat from the sun, or in other words, we don't have much shade, that radiant heat from the sun beating down on you is going to be a risk factor in developing a heat illness. Lack of air movement. I mean, it seems like common sense, but if you think about it, if you're working, even if it's a 90-degree day and it's humid and you've got a lot of sun, it sure feels better when we have air movement. And the reason is our sweat is evaporating. And when your sweat evaporates from your skin, it cools you down. As opposed to when there's no air movement, it doesn't. That's why fans feel so good. How hard are you working? If it's a particularly hot day and you're working very hard, well, it's going to feel quite a bit hotter. And then what PPE are you wearing? Now, to be clear, this doesn't mean that you should not wear your PPE. It just means that that is another risk factor for it. It's something that you want to pay attention to and be cognizant that that could actually make you feel hotter. What about some personal risk factors for developing heat illness? Well, it could certainly be acclimation. I know that this comes into play more than people give it credit for. So not being used to working in the heat. This is absolutely a personal risk factor for developing a heat illness. We have to take our time. Even if you're used to it, as we come out of the spring, as we come out of the winter into the spring and then into the summer, it takes a little bit of time to get used to working in the heat again. So we have to take that into account. Being in poor overall health, whether it is you or someone else, we need to pay attention. Do we have any cardiac issues? How about high blood pressure? And a myriad of other things. Of course, I'm certainly not a doctor, but we want to pay attention to that, and we don't want to throw people out into a hot environment, especially if they're not acclimated, if they are in poor health. So we want to be aware of that. Dehydration, something that I've seen over the years is dehydration on a Monday morning. And all jokes aside, people have a good time on the weekend. They are maybe consuming some alcohol, and alcohol is a diuretic. It dehydrates you. You go to work on a Monday, it's a hot day, and you set yourself up to get overheated. Caffeine, like alcohol, is what we call a diuretic. It makes you go to the bathroom a lot, and because of that, it's easy to become dehydrated. So if you're a caffeine drinker, especially those of you who love those Monster energy drinks, know that they're just loaded down with caffeine, and that is not a proper hydration drink. Doesn't mean you can't necessarily drink them, but I would be very careful on a particularly hot day because they can lead you to be overheated. How about a previous heat-related illness? So that's what we're talking about, showing there. If you have had a heat-related illness in the past, you are more likely to get another heat illness. A personal example for me is I've been overheated, had heat exhaustion twice, and um, the first time was a result of being dehydrated, and then the second time, I am convinced I felt like I was just much more susceptible to being hot because it happened the first time. So having that previous incident does leave you predisposed to having a second one. And then certain medicines, so things like diuretics. So some people that might have high blood pressure, some people will call them a water pill. They can cause you to get dehydrated more. Beta blockers, cold medicine. Cold medicine has antihistamines in it, and these are medicines that are known to cause issues when it comes to being overheated. So we just want to pay attention to it. Watch out for our work risk factors. Watch out for our personal risk factors, and then know what symptoms to look out for. So this handsome fella right here, excuse my sniffing. I just had a cat walk into the room, but this handsome fellow right here is sweating, right? And he is probably on his way to developing his first heat-related symptom, and that's going to be a heat rash. So if most people who have worked in the heat have gotten a heat rash before, but it's you get bumps or pimple-like blisters on your body, usually in the groin area or under arms or back of knees and elbows in your elbow, in the crease in your elbow. So or on your back, actually, that's a common place too. This is a sign that you're hot. One thing you don't want to do is unless a doctor prescribes it, don't put an ointment or some other type of material on your skin, because it keeps it warm, and it leads to an environment where you can have all kinds of lovely nasty things growing. So heat rash, though, as I mentioned, is your first symptom, and then what happens is you may move into the next symptom of heat rash, which could be heat exhaustion. And actually, in between that, what sometimes happens is you cramp before you get into some of these other symptoms, which we'll go over. So if you're starting to have cramps, whether that's in your calf or really anywhere else, I've had cramps related to heat one time in my neck, in the front of my neck. I yawned and then my neck cramped up, which is bizarre. But these heat cramps, another indication that you are beginning to get overheated. The next step would be heat exhaustion. Signs and symptoms of that are going to be, sweating a lot. There's sweating, and then there's just profuse sweating. Your body is doing everything it can to try to get you cooled down. You feel weak. You're weak at the knees, nausea and vomiting, headache, lightheaded, and then ultimately leading to fainting. Fainting now could be a potential emergency. I would say if it's hot outside and it's a 95-degree day and it's very humid and somebody has had some of these signs and symptoms and then they faint, that is I would go ahead and call 911 and get that person some help, because what we don't want it to do is kick over into a heat stroke. Heat stroke is when your core body temperature goes about 106 degrees or higher, and you are in trouble, because at this point you're not sweating anymore. Your skin is very dry, it's very hot, and depending on the skin tone of the person, it can be very red. They're going to act strange, so they're going to have an altered level of consciousness, just strange, bizarre behavior, possibly dizzy, and then having a seizure, a full body kind of convulsion where they just seize up. So any of these symptoms, any, you don't have to have more than one, you don't have to have them all. Any of them is a scenario where you are going to want to call 911 immediately. Don't wait. If you have any of that, call 911, cool the person down, take them inside, preferably in some AC or underneath some shade, and remove any unnecessary clothing and don't leave them. Monitor that person, make sure that they don't deteriorate anymore. More specifically, don't stop breathing, and get 911 there as soon as possible. How do we prevent any of this from happening? Let's watch our workload. Gradual workload. Move into it slowly. Remember what I talked about at the beginning, but we want to acclimate. Get used to being hot. Give your time body. It usually takes about 2 weeks to get fully acclimated. Drink frequently. What is frequently? Well, actually, before I say what frequently is, the night before is an ideal time to start hydrating. It takes time for a little bit of time for the water to be absorbed by your system, but what actually does the work is your intestines, and your intestines pull that water in, and that gets you well hydrated. It doesn't mean you don't drink during the course of the day, but you want to make sure that you're drinking drinking water or sports drinks the night before. So what does frequent drinking mean? About 8 ounces every 15 to 20 minutes. That's good. That's a good frequency, but you don't want to drink too much. How much is too much? It depends on the person, but we're talking, a couple of gallons a day is probably too much. I know a lot of places they use 12 quarts over 24 hours. So too much water is bad for you as well. But if you stick to that, if you're sweating heavily and you stick to that 8 ounces over 15 to 20 minutes, you should be good. Eat regularly. That replaces salts and minerals that you're using from sweating, and that helps maintain your body's chemistry. Use a buddy system. Talk at the beginning of the day and say, all right, man, it's going to be, a very hot day. Keep an eye on each other. Watch out for strange behavior, because a lot of times if you're having heat exhaustion, you might not know it. And then, worst case, they're going into the heat stroke and they have, altered level of consciousness, acting weird. They're definitely not going to know they're acting weird. So you need to pay attention. Have a buddy system. Rest frequently. It depends on how hot it is, but every 30 minutes is a good idea on the absolute hottest days. At least every 60. But that's where we need a competent person that can identify, predict that it's going to be a little bit hot, and it can get everybody to rest properly. I mentioned this already, but know those signs that we talked about, and I'll go over them one more time before we're done. But be aware of what you're looking at, and don't take it for granted. And then monitor the weather. So these days, most of us have smartphones. And there are a variety of apps that can help you with that. One of them that I like to show is this one. This is the OSHA and NIOSH heat safety tool. This one's only available for the iPhone, but there are a variety of ones that are available for Android as well. But what's cool about this one is it takes the location, where you are. Of course, this one's indicating McAllen, Texas, but it's taking the location and saying, all right, here's the temperature, here's the humidity at 76 and 66 degrees. We're at minimal risk. Well, that kind of makes sense, right? 76 degrees isn't necessarily that hot, although that's fairly humid. But you can go on up to low, moderate, high, and so on. It gives you an hourly heat index and tells you what precautions that you might need to take. And then a couple of things, what to do in a heat stroke, what to do in case of heat exhaustion. And then if you take this heat index that's indicated on the app, so what are we? We're at 76 degrees here, and 66% humidity. So we're roughly, actually it doesn't even go that high. So, if we were on this chart, this starts at 80 degrees and 76 or 66% humidity. So, real feel is probably somewhere around 80. But let's say we are at 94 degrees and it's 60% humidity. That's the real feel is 106, and that is in the danger zone. Now, when do we get into the extreme danger zone? If you get into this zone, I would say you don't need to be working. You don't need to be working in that heat because this is, imagine you have a day that is, we're 106 degrees, even at 40% humidity. It feels like 124. I'm sorry, actually, I guess that's not extreme. So go over one. You got 108 degrees at just 40% humidity. That's at 130 real feel, which is ridiculous. You really shouldn't be. Really, in my mind, you need to take some extreme caution where they say danger, because I agree. This is dangerous. This is where most people get in trouble. I think most people know that this is bad in the bright red, but this orange, that is your danger zone. One other thing to pay attention to, I gave you a screenshot here, would be you've probably started to see these. We're talking about urine color, but it's very important. Pay attention to it. And they've done a pretty good job. I know the military is really big on this, and I think they're the ones that kind of started pushing various charts. You see it in fire departments as well. But if your urine matches this color and a straw color, a light straw color, then you're drinking enough fluids. You want to stay somewhere in the 1 to 2 range. Even when you get here, you're dehydrated, and I'm sure you're all looking at that like when I pee, it looks like that all the time, and that means many of us are chronically dehydrated. This is where you're going to start getting heat-related problems. And right here, from 5 down, you're very dehydrated. It's a health risk, and drink more water. Now, pay attention if you take vitamins, and certain medications can cause the color of your urine to be a different color. Again, this is not medical advice. Consult your doctor, but this is a good chart to help you be aware of whether or not you are staying properly hydrated. What are some good ideas? What are some best practices that we can use to keep ourselves nice and safe? There are a variety. Sorry, got to get the screen the way I want it. There are a variety of things that we can do. Well, we can get some containers that have drinking water. Well, I think that's pretty darn simple. So have water on site, H2O. Make water available. That's OSHA would say the employer has a responsibility to provide a safe and healthy workplace. Have water available. Have Gatorade or Powerade. Again, I don't work for either one of these companies, or whatever sports drinks you want. No energy drinks. Stop it. You run the risk of getting overheated. So watch out for those energy drinks. What about having if you got a freezer, how about some popsicles or something like that? It's a great idea. Cooling trailer. Having a cooling trailer with some AC available so that people can go take those rest breaks, every 30 minutes, every 60 minutes or so, will help quite a bit. Have some clothing that is reflective of heat. There are products on the market that can help with that. How about some things like neck wraps and towels? These are things that you can drop in, have like a cooler that is, indicated that it's not drinking water, but you can dip it in the cold water and put it around your neck or put it on your head. It goes a long way to getting you cooled down. There are some commercially available cooling vests that have cold liquid running through them, and they are very good at keeping you cool. You could have PPE that is a little bit more lightweight, or it is ventilated. So, if you have some nice warm PPE in January, it really stinks in July. So maybe you can switch up, the PPE that you're using, and help keep yourself and your workers cool. So all of this in review is how we're going to stay safe, when we're working in the cold. So remember, heat illness has a lot of different risk factors to it. Some of them are going to be work related, which is what you see here, temperature and the work that we're doing and physical PPE. And some of it is going to be, the personal risk factors that we have and our acclimation and the things that we put in our body. And we're watching out for heat rash and cramps, and then going into that heat exhaustion, and then we get into a heat stroke, which that is an emergency. You want to call 911. Don't wait if the person stops sweating or they've got dry, hot, or red skin, strange, bizarre behavior, or dizzy, or have seizures. All right? These are things that we don't want to mess with. Cool that person down. Get them in the air conditioner. Get them in the shade. Take off any unnecessary clothing, and don't leave them. How do we prevent it? Acclimate. Take a week or two, really 2 weeks, to acclimate, to get used to that workload. Gradually dive into it, especially if you have new employees. Drink frequently. Hydrate the night before. On a really hot day, 8 ounces every 15, 20 minutes. Just don't drink too much, but 8 ounces or so every 15 or 20 minutes goes a long way to keeping you hydrated. Pay attention to the color of your urine. Work on a buddy system. Take breaks every 30, 60 minutes, and know the signs and symptoms. Some ideas: have a container available for sure. I don't even think this is that big of a light bulb moment, but you should definitely have water available. You don't want to have to take time to go to the store to go get it. It needs to be available right now. Gatorade and Powerade are great. Cooling trailer with some AC is a great idea. Heat reflective clothing or other accessories like a wrap to go around your neck, or a towel to go on your head, a great idea. Cooling vests or some kind of ventilated PPE. All of these things will go a long way to keeping you safe and healthy. All right, so that is heat illness. I hope you all have gotten a few ideas on this, or some of this, or some or all of this you may already know. But it's a good reminder, especially as we move into the warmer parts of the year. We want to pay attention to it. Make sure you're acclimating, watching out for your coworker, and staying safe. Okay, that's it. I'm Trey with Pinnacle Safety Solutions, and I will talk to you